This episode is sponsored by Lloyd's Register, a trusted partner in the evolving energy landscape, and EIC Global Platinum Partner. As the world works towards net zero, traditional fuels like oil and gas will remain essential in meeting global energy demands. Lloyd's Register supports operators across the energy spectrum, helping integrate renewables, hydrogen, nuclear, and carbon capture to existing systems. Their deep expertise ensures safe, efficient, and sustainable solutions across the full energy value chain. Backed by the Lloyd's Register Foundation, they provide independent guidance to help businesses make confident, future-ready decisions. Learn more at lr.org/energies or connect with the Lloyd's Register team in person at an upcoming EIC event. Hello everybody, it's Stuart Broadley here from the EIC and welcome to another EIC Energy Insights podcast. Today we're going to discuss a new EIC Market Intelligence and Insight report on the global exploration and production market, E&P. Upstream oil and gas. It's a new report published in June 2026. As with all of our market intelligence reports, it's for EIC members only. But today we are going to unpick a little bit of it, so a high-level taster for those of you that are not members. And if you like what you hear, of course, there'll be details on how to become a member in our description in the show notes of this podcast. We would love you to become a member. So I'm joined today by three of EIC's senior energy market analysts to help me unpack some of these key upstream oil and gas markets, regions, challenges and opportunities that the report details over its 76 pages. So firstly, Neil Golding is Director of Market Intelligence based in London, and he leads EIC's global market intelligence teams. Hi Neil, how are you doing?
Very well, Stuart. Thank you very much.
It's funny, isn't it? We're going to talk about the world's amazing oil and gas market, and yet we sit in the UK, which I think is the world's only government that hates oil and gas. It's not fair, is it?
It really isn't. But as we'll explore, there are numerous opportunities around the globe.
The brilliant UK oil and gas supply chain, of course, does not sit and wait for something to change here. They are active all over the world, and the supply chain is doing well, just maybe not so much in UK oil and gas right now. What a shame. Hopefully that will change. My next analyst that's joining us is Suffia Sulaiman, who is Market Intelligence Manager for the APAC and Middle East region, based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Hi, Suffia. How are you doing?
Hello, Stuart. Very good. How are you?
Well, I'm good, but I have to do a special thank you to you because it's your birthday today, and yet here you are doing this. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Malaysia, where you are, of course, is also such a cool market. I'm sure we'll talk about it. Actually, I did a podcast very recently with the three professors at the new Malaysian National Energy Centre. So there's so much ambition in Malaysia, so much being spent to position Malaysia as the heart of the ASEAN or even the Asian energy market of the future, right? Incredible.
I agree. There's a lot of potential, a lot of growth within the upstream sector in the region. And I think Malaysia is also very interesting position at the moment because the country sits in the center of a lot of regional energy flows, whether that's just oil and gas, LNG, power, and newer energy sector. So it's certainly an exciting time to be covering the market.
Last but not least, other analyst that's joining us is Lucas Ramos, who is lead energy analyst CapEx for the Americas region based in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Hi, Lucas. How are you doing? Are you excited for the World Cup?
Hi, Stuart. Hi, everyone. Yes, of course, as a Brazilian, we are very much looking forward for the sixth title, but we'll see.
All right. Don't rub it in. But not only is Brazil great at football, it's also great at energy, of course, nearly already net zero, and yet also brilliant at oil and gas. And I'm looking forward to actually another Petrobras podcast recording that I'm doing, an incredible market. And the Americas is such an interesting market, which I know we'll get to today. So actually, it's been a large team of EIC analysts that have contributed to this report. But thank you to Neil, Suffia, and Lucas for helping me today to take us through some of the highlights. We're going to do our best, aren't we, to provide a vivid discussion and do justice to the work of the wider team. So let's start. So Suffia, I'm going to come to you first. You cover Middle East, so GCC especially, and the APAC region. I would imagine we're all talking about energy security, of course. Is that one of the big drivers for upstream oil and gas investment right now?
Absolutely. Energy security is definitely one of the biggest drivers we're seeing, especially across Asia Pacific and Middle East. But what has changed is that the governments are becoming more pragmatic, I believe, because the energy transition is still important, but countries also recognize that they need reliable domestic supply, especially for power demand, industrial growth, and also to reduce reliance on import. So, for example, in APAC, I think Indonesia is a good example because a country is trying to reverse the production decline and has plans to tender up to 75 blocks by 28. And Malaysia is also actively promoting the exploration through its bids round and flexible PSC terms. Within the GCC, I think it's more direct because NOCs, the national oil companies, are leading the strategies. ADNOC is pushing the capacity expansion within the UAE.
So they left OPEC, didn't they? Do you think this is directly so that they can increase their production? Is that why they left?
I believe so, because one of the major development that they have done is leaving OPEC, as you mentioned. I think it will give UAE more flexibility over its production strategy. And this matters because ADNOC has been pursuing capacity expansion, gas self-sufficiency, and offshore development, as well as unconventional gas. And if I could highlight, for example, ADNOC is planning to award up to 55 billion worth of upstream and downstream projects between 26 and 28 as part of its wider 150 billion capital expenditure plan through 2030. So the country is also targeting 5 million barrels per day of production capacity by 2027. So I think from an upstream perspective, UAE could become more active and more independent in how it faces future production growth.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? That obviously, this is a year of the US-Israel war with Iran, and we all hope that at some point that ceasefire leads to a resumption of traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. But as we record this, it's an uncertain ceasefire. But for those countries in the Middle East, like Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, and others, hugely impacted by this. And yet what you're showing is that their investment is growing, not stopping. They're determined, are they? Is it to take advantage of the higher commodity prices, or is it to fund their redevelopment of their economy going forward because they're expecting that this is now kind of new normal? What does our data show about these types of projects? Are these all new developments? Are they just trying to keep production at the same levels? What are you seeing?
I don't think they are only taking advantage on higher prices because higher commodity prices can help project economics. But the investment in GCC is much more structural, if I could say that, because these countries are looking at long-term supply security, market share especially, and domestic growth. Saudi is investing gas through Jafurah to support the power, petrochemical, and in this industrial demand. Qatar is continuing North Field because LNG is central to its long-term export strategy, as we all know. And of course, UAE is pushing ADNOC's capacity expansion because it wants to strengthen its position as the major long-term producer. The conflict does create uncertainty, especially around the logistic export timelines and of the project execution, but I think it also reinforces why these countries want resilient supply chains, stronger domestic capacity, and more control of the production.
When you were talking about APAC, I know Australia is one of those interesting markets that the report covers. What are you seeing there?
For Australia, the main driver would be gas, and it has strong upstream fundamentals, especially around gas and LNG. But it is one challenging market from an execution perspective. But the opportunity is still there. Australia remains important for the LNG supply into the Asian markets like Japan and South Korea. And we are seeing activity around the offshore basins such as Otway, Carnarvon, Browse, and the other area. So there is also a trend towards these subsea tiebacks where operator can connect these new resources into existing infrastructure. However, if we were to talk about the challenge within the market, it's around the approvals and regulations. So environmental assessments, consultation requirements, and legal challenges can extend project timelines even after approvals are granted. For example, Greater Sunrise Project, it remains undeveloped partly because of the prolonged regulatory and jurisdictional issues between Australia and Timor-Leste. So I think it's fair to say that Australia is still a very important upstream market. But compared with other Southeast Asian markets, investors need to manage the higher costs, longer approvals, and more complex stakeholder requirements.
Okay, if we try and summarize, so gas is the dominant trend across the Middle East and APAC, with really interesting markets, including Indonesia, Malaysia, Australia, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and UAE. Obviously, the conflict is having an impact, but a lot of the investments were going to happen anyway. It's just that they're kind of being accelerated, or they're getting to FID faster, perhaps because of this, although there's much talk of an accelerated electrification, which is true. and accelerated renewables. It's true, but also this is going to accelerate gas developments particularly, but also oil developments in response. Interesting. And I suppose also a requirement for collaboration and partnership to just get on with making decisions. We can't have delayed decisions in APAC and the Middle East, where economists are still so tied to this sort of petro-state approach, so, to oil and gas industries. Thank you, Suffia. I'll come back to you at the end just with kind of any other thoughts. So I'll now come to you, Lucas, with the Americas view. And let's start with which regions in the Americas are you seeing the most activity around new developments?
It's important to say Suriname and Guyana. So in the Americas region, Suriname is the most recent addition, really, with a sanctioned FPSO just late 2024. It's in the Guyana-Suriname basin, and we've seen at least 6 phases receiving FID in Guyana. So, for example, Guyana didn't produce any oil before 2019, and now it produces nearly 1 million barrels per day of oil. So it's incredible.
I went to Guyana before they'd even discovered oil. I'm one of those rare people you'll meet that's actually been there before oil was discovered, and I haven't been since, so I actually need to go back, don't I?
Yes, it's more than 30 discoveries in the country, and we've seen a lot of activity going on there. As the Exxon announced up to 9 phases to the moment for the development of the Stambrook block. The last phase, the 9th phase, of course, it's still pre-FEED, still there, for environmental permitting stages. But it's not only the development of oil resources, but also condensate gas resources. And we've seen that the area of the Guyana-Suriname basin as a main frontier growth, right, for the Americas. It's mainly light sweet crude oil that's being produced.
Talking about neighbors to Guyana, of course, Suriname is catching up quickly, right?
Yes, Suriname is there. There's one FPSO sanctioned. But of course, there are other activities going on at the moment. So we've seen oil and gas rounds occurring with several companies acquiring offshore areas recently there in the country. We've seen seismic activity on ongoing exploratory drilling also occurring in the country with IOCs. Petronas, for example, it's a NOC, but also activity in Suriname. And both countries present opportunities perhaps on the development of offshore gas resources, just like we've seen in APAC. So it's really exciting moments in the Americas.
If you're enjoying this podcast and think you have an inspiring story to tell, contact me, Stuart Broadley, directly, as I would love to do a sea-level podcast with you too. EIC is proud to be the UK's largest membership energy trade association and the 5th largest in the world. We are unique around the world for 3 reasons. We are truly energy agnostic, believing all energy technologies are vital to delivering energy security, affordability and a just transition. We are the only energy trade association anywhere in the world that offers a truly in-house one-stop shop for market intelligence, networks and events to help our members export, diversify and grow. And we are proud to be the voice of the energy supply chain, advocating for the 5 golden rules of a healthy energy supply chain. More details on EIC membership, the 5 golden rules, details about doing a future podcast with me, and how to contact us about anything else are in the description for this podcast. Another neighbour to Guyana, of course, is Venezuela, and talked about a lot in the last year, sort of, if you like, US intervention. How quickly is the Venezuela market opening up?
Yeah, so that is a tricky question. We've seen, ever since the capture of former presidents, we've seen some regulatory overhaul in the country. Mixed contracts are being stimulated, to occur alongside PDVSA. So, of course, specifics have yet to be worked on, but foreign investors are seeing gradually more and more favorable investment scenarios. So we've seen gradually more oil production coming from the country. We've seen more oil exports flowing to US, Europe, and India mainly. And of course, Venezuela has the largest proven oil resources of heavy oil, mostly in the Orinoco belt. And from the mixed contracts, we have PDVSA, which is the national oil company, has some mixed contracts with relevant, right, oil and gas companies, including Chevron, Repsol, ENI, CNPC, and some other Eastern companies. Ever since the capture of the president, many companies are agreeing to relaunch some projects, right, offshore the country, even if it's heavy oil or if it's offshore gas. Some projects are in fields that straddle the frontiers of Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago, for instance. So we have been seeing increasing opportunities in the country. Of course, it's still a wait and see scenario, right? It's gradually unfolding, but it is more open for foreign investors and interested companies.
Obviously, there are some redevelopments of mature fields happening in Brazil and gas developments continuing in, as you say, Trinidad and the US. But would you say the Americas is leading in new oil and gas project developments, or is that overstating it?
I would say that South America, for instance, in terms of new build platforms, is the main region. We've seen we have already a confirmed pipeline of projects in South America, mainly Petrobras in Brazil. Of course, many of these Petrobras projects are redevelopment, but are also new developments in pre-salt areas. But company recently sanctioned 2 FPSOs for the northeastern coast of Brazil, which would also eventually bring offshore gas resources to the coast. And this conversation that we're having about the importance of the gas resources, it's everywhere.
It doesn't feel like the oil and gas market is going anywhere from what both you and Suffia have talked about so far. Huge developments coming up. So a lot of these developments, do you think, have been accelerated because of energy security concerns and this idea of a long-term closure of the Strait of Hormuz is not so much having an effect in day-to-day lives of people in the Americas, but it is sponsoring faster movement to FID of these projects. Do you think that's the case?
I would say that's the case. It's a bit more complicated. There are other factors at play. The supply chain risks that this whole situation brings up. But as long as there is resources available and there is technology being deployed and developed to extract these resources at a fair price, the Americas region, it's a bit more stable in terms of geopolitical conflict than other regions. So yes, a lot of resources there, and I don't see the Americas region as unstable as some other areas.
In fact, rather than stepping back, you could say they feel like they're stepping up.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go, Neil, to you and then look at Europe and Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa. So should we start with Norway?
Why not? Close to home, of course, for us here based in the UK. And
Norway are quite the opposite to the UK, aren't they, in their view of our shared basins of oil and gas that are out there in the North Sea?
absolutely the polar opposites, I think it's fair to say. A very supportive government policy within the country, and that can be seen as well with the licensing rounds that continue to take place and blocks that are being awarded, whether that be in the mature basins of the North Sea or the Norwegian Sea, but equally in the more frontier basins of Norway, which is ultimately the Barents Sea, where, of course, there's less exploration that has taken place. I think this supportive government policy is one of the reasons why you continue to see, and we have seen, an increase in the number of new discoveries that have been made since 2021. That peaked at 19 new discoveries in 2025 versus 12 in 2021. We've seen 60 projects that have been sanctioned since 2021 within the market as well, albeit a lot of these projects, though, are smaller discoveries, which cost less to develop because they are in close proximity to existing subsea infrastructure. What does this mean? It means Norway continues to maintain its production levels and continues to be very relevant as a major exporter to Europe and elsewhere in the world as well for both oil and gas.
That's then the number one, the top mature market opportunity in Europe remains to be Norway. What about frontier basins?
You then have to look at the East Med, two very exciting markets. Initially, 15 to 18 TCF of gas there that's been discovered across 6 major discoveries, and the presence of your major oil companies will also see those projects advance. And hopefully we will see the advancement now with some of those projects to a final investment decision within the next 12 months. And we talked a little bit already around collaboration, where there will be cross-border collaboration in terms of the development of these gas fields as well. And that's with Egypt, where Cyprus will utilize the existing gas pipelines and LNG infrastructure to monetize the discoveries that have been made. Go a little bit further north and to the east, not strictly East Med, but certainly the Black Sea as well of Turkey is a very interesting market. And yes, we've got up to Sakarya Phase 3, which is one of the major offshore developments that exists there. But we're also now seeing wells being drilled in the vicinity of that particular field by TPAO, which is the Turkish Petroleum NOC. But also now within Turkey, you have a basin that is attracting the majors. So MOUs having recently been signed with BP, Shell, Chevron, and TotalEnergies that also see the deep waters of Turkey as being potentially very prospective.
Is this what some are now calling the Great Bypass? So as a consequence of the Strait of Hormuz being closed for much longer than people imagined, there are developments being planned to find alternative routes, seaways and overland routes to get oil and gas to the key market of Europe. Is this what's happening, or were these projects already planned? And again, are they just going faster?
The projects are already planned, but like you've mentioned there, I do feel that has been an acceleration in the pace of the developments. And certainly that can be seen with the negotiations between the various governments to advance these fields into production.
So sub-Saharan Africa then, I mean, it's a combination of mature market opportunities and frontier again?
100%. And there are some very interesting markets here. We could have covered probably 7-8 markets, but for purposes of this report, we focused upon 4, 2 of which are mature markets, Angola and Nigeria, and Namibia being the frontier market. And that's where I'll start, is Namibia. I actually think that Namibia is probably one of the most exciting frontier markets globally at the moment, and that follows the discovery that was made in 2022 by TotalEnergies. That's the Venus discovery, which is now advancing towards a final investment decision. But we've also seen other large oil discoveries. And so this is slightly different. We see a lot of gas discoveries advancing. We're now seeing the oil discoveries advance here in particular. We've seen Shell look at the market. They've made what they initially deemed non-commercial discoveries, but they've just completed the drilling of a new oil and gas discovery, which we had tracked as part of this report, which has encountered better quality reservoirs and also associated gas. So that again shows huge promise. And there are other smaller players like Rhino Resources in this market that are now moving towards the appraisal drilling on what looks like, again, a very significant oil discovery. I think the next 12 to 24 months, we are going to see a number of projects in that market finally reach a final investment decision.
It's all about speed of regulation and permitting and so on, or is this still the main word of caution here until these things are done? They're not done at all.
That's it. There is still government legislation and regulation that needs to be finalized in Namibia, and part of that is linked to local content within the market as well. So that local content policy is currently being written up. I think one thing that I would advise Namibia on is not to set the target too high, given that there is no supply chain that exists already within the marketplace. So be open to the international supply chain in helping advance these particular projects.
I guess everybody listening in is like, this is all brilliant information, keep going. But actually, this is only a taster of all the detail that's in this report. But I will then just wrap up with asking each of you to give just a very quick closing thought. Lucas, I'll come to you first. So it sounds like it's a growing market, but it must be very sensitive still to kind of geopolitics. So how would you summarize?
We do see some overall positive outlook because of how the region usually is decoupled from this geopolitical instability, some infrastructure constraints that the region naturally doesn't have as much, driven by low-cost production, of course, by low break-even prices, mainly in Guyana, Suriname. Also, some low carbon emission production. And we just have to beware of some instability coming from other regions. And of course, there was also the condition of commercialization of gas, either through regional integration, through FLNG schemes. We have been seeing these solutions appearing for some offshore projects in the area. And we believe that coming years could see some opportunities being unlocked in that sense.
Wow, it's just opportunities everywhere. What a crazy market. Thank you, Lucas. Suffia, same question for you, really. How would you summarize? Also, growing market, but you've got to be selective, haven't you?
Yep, one of the key messages from the report. Upstream investment is not disappearing, but rather it is becoming more selective, more gas-led, and increasingly driven by the energy security. I think opportunity remains sizable across the APAC and also the Middle East, but not every market will attract the capital equally. The winners will be the markets that can offer high-quality resources, existing infrastructure, supportive government policies, and of course, clear route to commercialization. We are also seeing that operators becoming more disciplined. They are looking closely at project economics, execution risks, and how quickly a resource can be brought to market. And that's why we're seeing growing interest in terms of like infrastructure-led development, partnerships such as closer to home Petronas ENI, Sarah joint venture, and also projects that can leverage existing facilities through tiebacks and brownfield expansion. So in my opinion, that the industry remains active and optimistic, but investment decisions are becoming much more targeted than they were.
Thank you, Sophia. And now you're free to go off, enjoy the rest of your birthday. Thank you. And Neil, I guess final word to you then. If you're thinking about Europe and obviously Sub-Saharan Africa, perhaps just globally overall, how would you summarize?
Sophia's again touched upon something that I was going to mention here, government intervention, how important that is in terms of these developments moving forward. And Nigeria and Angola are great examples of where the government has intervened, and that has allowed 4 projects now to advance through to the FID phase, having been stalled for some time. What that also allows for the operators is that certainty as well, with good policy direction, that there will be returns on investment. And the project economics then will work because they are making sure that they're putting in the right levels of tax associated with producing from these particular fields. But I think what is really noticeable in the last 12 to 18 months has been that refocus of the majors, the IOCs, into the upstream oil and gas sector.
I mean, they're not EICs anymore, are they?
Absolutely not. I think it's becoming very clear where the bulk of their, if not all of their capital expenditure is really going to be moving towards, certainly in the next 2 to 3 years anyway. And that is very much in the upstream oil and gas sector and related oil and gas industries as well.
That's a brilliant way to close out here. Firstly, thank you to the 3 of you for providing some information which is very helpful. But we have a huge amount of information like this. This is just a snapshot, this new report, which comes from our DataStream database, which covers 17,000 projects around the world, tracking $17 trillion worth of project opportunities. And that's across all energy sectors, not just upstream oil and gas. If you're in a business where you're trying to find the next market opportunity, whether it's a region or a technology or a customer, please let us know. We'd love to have you in our membership. And meanwhile, I hope everybody found that really, really helpful. Neil, Sophia, Lucas, thank you again to you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Bye.
sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, that's our show for today. A huge shout out to Samara, Lucas and Joao and the rest of our incredible team behind the scenes. This show truly wouldn't happen without them. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean the world if you'd hit that follow button. Give a 5-star rating or leave a review. It's the best way to help us keep doing what we love. And as a thank you, I'll leave you with my favourite 5-word joke. Love wind power. Big fan.